All right, great. Thank you for joining me. Like I said, I'm Ashley. I'm the London coordinator, and I'm the streams lead for arts and libraries. So theaters, art galleries, museums, libraries all fall under what I'm doing. Today we'll kind of just go through, I'm assuming a certain level of understanding of City of Sanctuary, as most people are from local groups or partners that we work with in local areas. So if I skim over stuff that has to do with City of Sanctuary that you don't know, please just let me know and I can touch back on it at the end. And we'll be going through a bit about the streams work and the assessment process so that you as local groups can run assessments on your own for some of the sectors that we do awards in. So we'll touch on the streams and the streams that this training is applicable, and then we'll go through applications and assessments and kind of the timeline and the awards. So our streams, we use the term streams to refer to all mainstream institutions and organizations that work towards creating a culture of welcome across the UK. That's everything from schools, universities, colleges, faith institutions, arts and libraries, like I said, gardens, local authorities. We've had a couple shops. We've also had a couple of different institutions come to us saying they would really like to be awarded, and we've worked with them to see how we can apply our minimum criteria for institutions to that particular institution, like a food bank, or I'm trying to think of some of the other ones. I think a recent one was cafes. Yeah, exactly. And we see these streams as pivotal to part of our building of a movement across the UK. We have our local groups that do a lot of the groundwork and advocacy and campaigning and connecting with the local communities and understanding local needs. And then we have institutions that can project that sense of welcome across communities that may not be engaging directly with the movement or the sector. And so that's why we've chosen to work on working with different sectors and creating awards for those institutions that are doing amazing work. So we refer to a term called Streams Lead, and this is on the national level. We have different leaders that manage the different sectors that we work in. At the end, I'll have a list of all the sectors that we have an official lead for and their contact information. You can always email your regional coordinator to find out who that person is. So don't think you have to write it all down. It's also available on our website. And oftentimes what we recommend is that you connect with that stream lead when you know that an application is coming in your region. Even if you know you can handle the assessment and you're confident with that, it's great for us to know that the award is happening, so we can also help to promote and celebrate and answer any questions about support that you may need. So a stream lead is a great person to provide you with template emails for your local, for responding to a request for award information. They can guide people to signing the organizational pledge of support, and we will be sharing with you different documents that you can send to them. And then we have resources for the different streams, including the application form, an assessment, minimum criteria, a resource pack, and examples of applications. And that's all available through your stream lead for a particular sector. So this is just briefly to go over what the timeline looks like. We often see that somebody either makes the organizational pledge or expresses interest to a local group or a regional coordinator, and that usually comes at the very beginning. And after that, there's typically a conversation, a template email that has all the resources connecting. So if I get a theater that's interested, I will connect them with their local group or regional coordinator and start building those relationships. And then after they've done a bit of a self-audit and an application, they would submit the application. Oh, I'm just seeing some notes I forgot to delete. Apologies. Then after the application is submitted, that's when the timeline starts for the assessment. And that you have to work really on what is most feasible to you. And you would do the assessment with a panel. And I'll get into a little bit about what the panel would look like, followed by the award. And then in 3 years, you would do a reassessment. Our awards are for 3 years. And then the reassessment, you look back on their application and see what they've been doing, and also add what the next 3 years will look like for them. So a few tips on the application. Ask the institution to express interest as early as possible, for them to say that they're looking to apply in the spring or they're looking to apply in the fall. And that is particularly for local groups that are doing their own assessments online. Many of the sectors have dates for when applications are accepted. Those dates are specific to institutions and areas that don't have local groups that are doing the assessments. So that means that I have to set up the assessment panel and do that type of support work. And so I've chunked it into different dates for me to be able to do that. If you're a local group doing an assessment, you can accept an application whenever works for you. So those dates aren't bound by the online dates. We also suggest having a look at a draft application and providing feedback, so that when you are ready to do assessment, you actually feel quite confident that they're ready to be assessed, and there's not any big holes in their application that's just going to turn it back around to another cycle, because I know people's time is quite strained. So an assessment panel's time to find out that they're really not ready is a bit of a waste of time if they could have done more work, especially if you know the group is doing a lot of work, but they haven't put it in their application. Give them that feedback and have them put it in there so that the assessment goes as smoothly as possible. And as soon as you know an organization will be applying, I would start thinking about what that assessment panel looks like for that institution, and you can start noting and maybe planting the seed to people that you think would be great for that assessment. I often run into that people's time is quite strained, and getting everybody's time to link up for a panel becomes the biggest obstacle to awarding an institution, and that sometimes pushes the award date a month down the line because I'm having to get everybody's calendars aligned. So starting to think of that and place calendar holds is a great way to avoid having to delay awarding. Okay, so some tips for what a good application looks like. We generally have minimum criteria that is sometimes quite vague. For example, in the art stream, it's rather vague because we want institutions to design their application that fits the work they're doing and how they see themselves creating welcome in their community. But some things is that they clearly reference the minimum criteria. We have those listed out, and so it's quite easy for them to directly link what they're putting in the application to the minimum criteria. We hope for links to evidence and examples of work, so whether that's photos or actual hyperlinks to an article that was written or a website page that addresses that, and then that they have a clear understanding of the City of Sanctuary theory of change and our methodology of learn, embed, and share for how we look at institutions. And both of those documents I'll link with the recording after this. So anybody that wants a refresher, you'll be able to have those, as well as the other documents I talk about. Cool. So pre-assessment, kind of the checklist of things to do is assembling your assessment panel, providing support to any persons of lived experience that are going to be sitting on the panel, and visiting the institution. And those are kind of the things you can do. Some of those you can start doing before they've officially applied. If you know their application is imminent, like you've been working with them and you know they're going to be applying, you've already visited the institution because you've been working with them, or things like that, or kind of things that would be happening in the interim between them expressing interest in applying and the assessment panel. And so officially the assessment looks like a visit to the institution, filling out the assessment tool and providing feedback, the panel, and then we have some tips at the end of how to run that assessment panel. So building the assessment panel. So typically we would like an assessment panel to be at least 3 people. It can be as many people as you see fit to provide feedback and comments on the application. So this is kind of our preferred checklist, and it can look in many different ways. So someone from a local group where that exists, or someone in the local community that works directly with the institution, someone with lived experience in seeking sanctuary. Ideally, this is somebody that has an interest in the sector. So someone that's interested in theater, or someone that is involved in the colleges or ESOL or something like that. Or it can be someone that works with the local group so that they have an understanding about what the award is about. And this is the person that particularly that we think need to provide support to ahead of time to make sure they have the confidence to speak about their concerns or thoughts or questions about the appraisal, and just empowering them to be an active voice on the panel. And then to also, another tip in preparing the panel is this is a unique opportunity for networking across your local area. So thinking about who would be a good connection for the institution, or who in the panelists you think could work with them on something, or that you're trying to encourage to be more engaged in the network. So it's just an opportunity for those relationships to develop, because it's quite an intimate conversation that's happening around the work. So it's a great place for that. Okay, so this is the assessment tool that we work on the national level. This is just a screenshot of one that I pulled as our general assessment, and it has the minimum criteria listed. And so this is the first page of it. And basically what you would do is you would take the application and copy the evidence from the application. I usually do literally them side by side and copy and paste the evidence from the application where I see it fitting under each criteria. And then in the feedback, I put any notes or questions I want to ask at the panel. So oftentimes I do this, and then I put it into a Google Doc that I share with the panelists, so the panelists can add their own feedback and questions, and then it's the running document for the assessment. We're able to just go through it. I highlight if there's any evidence that I think needs more information, or if there's a criteria that I didn't see met in the application, so that we can talk about it at the assessment. And so this document, we are in the process of finalizing a template of it for the different sectors, that we'll share all of those different templates with the local groups, so that you can use them for assessments with the matching criteria for the awards that have those. Something I meant to mention is that some of the sectors, a national team member needs to be a part of the assessment at this time, and some of them locals can be trained up. So for example, universities, local authority, colleges, and like larger health sector, like a health trust or something, we would want the national stream lead to be a part of that assessment. Schools, we have a local leads training that people can do for schools, and then they can run their own schools assessment. And then the other streams, like arts, gardens, libraries, faiths, doing a training like this and touching base with the Streamlead is enough to be able to do those assessments on your own and just include the national so we know what's happening. So a few tips to help make it run smoothly, being realistic with your timeline to set up a panel, review the application, visit the institution, basically don't overpromise and commit to like being like, oh, we'll get back to you by the end of the month or something. It does take time to align calendars, especially if you weren't expecting the application, it can take a bit longer. So to be prepared for that with the organizations when they apply. If you want to do a push of applications before Refugee Week, I would suggest setting a deadline for your local institutions because quick turnarounds are hard to do. So setting up a panel, say you're going to have a panel that reviews 4 organizations to be able to award by Refugee Week, just like work backwards on what that timeline is going to look like and let the institutions know when they have to submit by. Invite institutions to have a member from their staff that is not leading on the award process as part of the assessment panel. I typically ask them to invite somebody that either is like on the floor working with the program or from a completely different department to come for the first 10 minutes of the assessment to talk about how they engage with the sanctuary work and things like that. Just to hear it from somebody that's not completely involved in the process is always nice. And I sometimes learn about things that they've forgotten in the application from the people that are on the ground implementing the programs. I mentioned on the assessment tool, copying the evidence directly from the application into the assessment tool means that at the panel, you only have to have one document and you don't have to be going back and forth between the two. I often like to have panelists send their questions to me beforehand. Partially, it makes sure that everybody's had a read of the application. And in cases where someone might drop out at the last minute, you actually have their feedback. So if you had a panel of 4 and someone last minute can't come on the date, but you have their feedback, then you still have their input. So you still have a full panel. So getting that feedback ahead of time is always great. And then you can always ask the national lead if they're available for an assessment, and depending on timing, we're always happy to support and be available. Yeah, so that's always a resource if you're struggling to get like a last minute on an assessment, is to ask your regional coordinator or the national lead if they're available. Yeah, so the awarding process is pretty straightforward. You go through the assessment, and if you feel like they've met all the minimum criteria, then they're set to be awarded. And we always look at the awarding of an institution. We call it minimum criteria because we know all institutions can and will probably do more than what's in the application. So it's like setting a baseline of celebrating the work they're doing and encouraging them to engage more through the networks we have, through connecting them into the community and things like that. So I oftentimes will award with conditions or award with recommendations. So if I think they're doing exemplary work, but I also think there's something that they really should be doing more of or something, I always do like an award with the recommendation of this, which is always great for reaccreditation. You can check if they took those recommendations into account. I've had some institutions message me back when they've achieved that recommendation, so I know they actually took it to heart and worked on it. When awarding, you typically will send a logo that says like arts stream, like arts sanctuary in the arts or library of sanctuary or whatever, and then a certificate, your assessment notes with any highlighted feedback that you would like for them to address or just to make sure that they see. And then you would include Hannah, our comms manager, and the stream lead in an email, either CC'd or BCC'd, so that we know that's happening, so we can celebrate with you and also update our website and database, just so we know we can map how much of the movement is growing around the UK. And then there's a few of the streams have national networks, like there's an arts network and a libraries network and a schools network. So making sure to connect the local institution that's being awarded into that network is really important, because part of being awarded is being able to feedback and share best practices and learn from the other institutions. And then celebrate. I think because of COVID, the celebrating was a bit dampened with how institutions celebrated, but I've seen an uptick now of organizations really wanting to celebrate getting the award with a coffee hour and an award ceremony or a concert or all sorts of different things to really take a moment and celebrate the achievement. Yeah, and so just some tips to celebrate: tell the media, host an event, invite local leaders. Mayors oftentimes like to come to things like that. Make sure you have a printed certificate for the organization and that they get the logo so they can display it on their website as well. And then again, telling the national stream lead and Hannah so that we can celebrate on a national level as well as putting on social media and things like that. Okay, just to summarize, the 3 stages are application, assessment, and award, and these are kind of the things that happen under each of those. Yeah, express interest, sign pledge, have the organization do a self-audit to see if they're ready to apply, and then apply. Then for assessment, assemble the panel, train anybody with lived experience or anybody on the panel that needs some support, review the application and visit the institution, and then do the panel assessment. And then in the award, sending the assessment notes, the certificate and logo, updating the local and national website, celebrate, and spread the news. That's kind of like, I've made a bit of a checklist for myself to see like that I've done everything, which we can also share, that kind of runs through the whole process. This is, oh, that's actually quite small type. I don't know if you can read those, but it's also available on the website and we can put the link in the chat, but that's the different sector leads and their contact. But you also, anybody that's in this training that wants to find out about a contact, you're also welcome to email me, Ashley at cityofsanctuary.org. Yeah, and I think that's it. So kind of went through that fast and it was a lot of information. I'll share PowerPoint and video and all the resources I mentioned at the end, but I wanted to keep it brief so that we would have time for questions and conversation. So I'm going to stop the recording now and then we can have a bit of a conversation. I can see some things in the chat, but I haven't been able to look at them yet.